Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Holly Barker Flynn, and I am the Director of Alumni Programs here at the University at Albany's Alumni Association. I am thrilled to be joined today by Rachael O'Meara. Rachael is an executive coach renowned for empowering successful leaders with proven tools and strategies to excel without the overwhelm, which is a big challenge for many of us. With over a decade at Google, she brings invaluable insight into effective leadership and self-awareness. As a co-founder of the Venture Studio, Rachael drives results at the intersection of leadership and entrepreneurship. Rachael is the best-selling author of Pause, a pivotal resource for career growth and leading with self-awareness, featured in the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, HBR, and the TEDx stages. Rachael inspires leaders worldwide with her transformative approach to leadership, team culture, and personal development. She lives in Sarasota, Florida with her husband and continues to ski, bike, and row her way through life. Rachael, thank you so much for being with us here today. I'm excited that you're going to share your insight with us, and then I'll join you back on at the end with some questions that our guests have sent in before. So thank you, and I'll turn it over to you.
Hey, thanks, Holly. Hi, everyone. It's so good to be here. And this is my first official Albany event. So I'm bringing my cheer here and exciting. I'm on the West Coast, so it's 9 a.m. my time. I know it's, but I'd love to hear where you're from. If you have the chat available, I think you do. Go ahead and just type in where you are in the world. I always love to see where folks are. And yeah, I was in the class of 94. Got my bachelor's in geography and a minor in, business and geology. There you go. So you can see I'm using those skills all the time. And that's just so fun because I think no matter what you study, like you end up on your life path. And if you aren't, then you kind of know it. You kind of know like, where am I going? Why am I not feeling aligned? And which brings us to our topic today, how to avoid burnout. And I wrote a book called Pause, which we'll get into some of the tools in there, and then we'll answer those questions. So if you'd like to if you'd like to connect with me on LinkedIn, I have a QR code here on this first page. And later on towards the end, I'll actually have a couple of gifts that you can get so that you can keep in touch or read more about this topic if you want more details, because we only have a little bit of time today. We're going to just be tipping the iceberg. All right, so yes, here's what we're going to talk about. I'll share my story a little bit, how I got to be talking about this topic. I'm going to talk about burnout in the stages. Actually wasn't going to cover that, but someone asked a question about this, and I have this information, so I'm happy to share it. And then these 3 keys that I put together, and understand that you can also be someone who can change things, right? So we'll put together a very simple pause plan at the very end. All right. And I love to keep it interactive. So if you can put things into the chat or the Q&A, sorry, I know you're using the webinar function here. That would be awesome. So we can just kind of keep the momentum. I mentioned I'm on the West Coast. Holly mentioned I worked at Google. I worked in New York for 10 years, worked at Google and double-clicked there. And then I moved into Google when we got acquired by 2008. And I left about 3 years ago. So I was there a long time. I was there, I'd call myself a lifer. DoubleClick and Google was a 22-year career span, which is nuts. And I left because I wanted to focus full time on helping people not feel so stressed, because I know the tools that I learned changed my life. And you can see here, I went on and got some other degrees. I also went to Fordham in New York, and my book Pause came out in 2017 based on my burnout of Google in 2011. And from there, I also wrote a journal in 2022. And then last fall, Leading with Self-Awareness is a collaboration of 25 authors. It's a really good book for anecdotes and stories about being more self-aware. So all of these books are relevant to today. But it really wasn't that rosy all the time for me at Google. In fact, a couple years in, I had gotten a new job as a manager. And what I realized was I was getting these signals, these comments from my manager, who really had good intentions for me, that I wasn't doing very well. In fact, she would tell me things like, hey, Rachael, you might want to consider having more executive presence. Rachael, you need to be better at organizing, at communicating up and down and across the organization. And I was also managing a new team in tech that needed to come up with some new tools and ways of evaluating that were new, and I needed to do those in different ways and just needed more improvement, essentially. And so for the life of me, I could not figure out why the heck all of a sudden I was feeling like a failure. And what I realize now, looking back, is that I really just wasn't present. Meaning I was either always in the future thinking about, what do I need to do next? What is the email I need to get off my plate? What's the meeting I have to prep for? What is this person gonna, what can I expect this person to tell me so that I can make sure I have a good answer? Or I was thinking and being stuck in the past, meaning the coulda, shoulda, wouldas. And anyone here relate to that, where it's like, oh, why did I say this in the meeting? Or, oh, if I'd only shared X. And why did this guy look funny at me? Like, I think he was mad or angry or disappointed. And this woman just felt like, she was making fun of me, I feel like. And so I was just like putting these crazy judgments in my head, creating them myself, but I wasn't present, meaning I didn't know how I was feeling. Like I wasn't aware to know, wow, I'm feeling a lot of fear. So I'm making up these stories, or I wasn't feeling in my body to know those things were going on, and being present with other people, because all they saw was me kind of like flitting around and like doing a lot of things, and just really wasn't adding up. So one day my manager sat me down in her office and just said, hey, Rachael, I don't know if this job's a fit for you. You might want to consider doing something else. Boom, like crucible moment right there. And so I went home that weekend. I realized, maybe there's something else I could be doing. I really thought a lot about it. I talked to some good friends, and they told me, hey, doesn't Google have a sabbatical program? And so what happened was I ended up doing my research and I made my case and I got approval for a 3-month unpaid break. But what happened was I took those 3 months not to fill up my schedule, not to do the things I was doing, because that's all I was doing was being busy. So this was very different for me, but I did return to work. I didn't know if I would, but I did return to work, and I started hosting speakers in the Authors at Google program, which maybe you've come across that in YouTube. There's hundreds of great authors in there. I've done a few of them. And I realized, work doesn't have to be this grind, and I don't have to put myself in a box, but I can show up in ways that are more into me. Another 10 years. And I worked on a team in sales. I got a new job, and I really changed the way I was in every aspect. And I say that because maybe you've experienced something similar where you felt like things weren't working out, or you got the sit down talk with someone who gave you a proverbial pink slip, as I like to call it. And all of this is in the first chapter of the book, Pause, by the way, and more or less, well, I guess less, but you can imagine, there was a lot of lessons that I started learning because I started studying emotional and social intelligence the following year when I came back, because one of those authors invited me to their talk in their workshop in Chicago, the Wright Graduate University. And so off I went and I started learning these tools, and I was like, wow, I can't be the only one in corporate who's burned out. Let me write this book. I think it's going to be a book. I don't really know, but let me help people understand that you don't have to go through the grind. You don't have to feel horrible. You can actually thrive. You can actually really feel fulfilled if you just know a few tools based in emotional and social intelligence. And so that's what I did. And so now I'm a full-time executive coach, leadership coach, speaker, and I'm committed towards my mission to help individuals, leaders in all facets of business reclaim their lives and thrive. Because if I can do it, anyone can do it. So with that, that's kind of the story that I have, which I didn't look external. I knew I would just be doing something the same over and over again unless I changed something that was me, the common denominator in different things. So my question to all of you, and you can put this in the Q&A chat there, how do you typically respond to stressful events in your life? How do you? Do you take them head on? Do you kind of like think about it for a long time? Is it more of like a reactive thing? Is it passive? I mean, these are all options, right? And there's no right or wrong, but we all have our own way. And it's usually based on unconscious patterns and things that we don't really realize or self-aware of that we know. And there's always forces in tension, okay? So if you put your hands up, like me holding up, like imagine you've got 2 ski poles here. one hand is productivity and one hand is beingness and just being like, relaxed and part of that lifestyle that you want to be known for, which is who you are, right? So there's the productivity side, the doing, and then there's the being, and we have to hold both. And there's tension there, right? Like imagine two magnets repelling each other. They're going to repel each other. They're not meant to be like, yeah, this is easy. This is something we can easily hold on to, but we all want to work and do the best work that we can, which is the productivity side, but we also want to keep well-being in place and have some peace of mind. And so it's our job, each of us, in your job, to hold both of these poles for yourself. No one else is going to hold them for you. And if we're not holding them, like if you just put one hand down, maybe it's, whatever hand it is, this isn't very balanced, right? There's like one side that's doing all the work. And I just illustrate that because just expect the tension. That's normal, right? And people, I think it's hard to know that if we don't normalize it. And I know now in our 24/7 economy and world, and I worked in tech, so I get it, that we're always on. So pause, this concept that I coined, this word's been around forever, but I call it and define it as any intentional shift in behavior. So it's not necessarily quantity, it's actually more quality. It's the quality of what you want to do. And that could be something really quick, like being on this webinar. This is a pause, in my opinion. This is intentional. You came here, you didn't have to be here. There's 3 million other things you could do, but you showed up for yourself and maybe to learn something, right? That's a pause. So it doesn't depend on time or money or activity. It just is about what works for you, right? And this word, like I said, we think of it, when you see this word, what comes up for you? What's in your mind? I know for me, I was like, break, hanging out on the beach, put my feet up on a chair, drinking a Mai Tai in Jamaica or something like that. And like, yeah, that can be a pause, but I think of it as something not as passive as that. To me, it's active. And right now in our 7 days a week economy, this is a word that we think of as rest, but I'm proposing that we flip it on its head. And it's actually more of an active state because you're intentional. That's all it is. So if you're one of these folks like me, which I know you are because you're on this webinar and you went to Albany, you're a high achiever and you don't want to slow down, and it's not easy. Our society doesn't reward that, and we're at a rapid pace. So we have to make it intentional or else forget it. It just won't happen. And the next thing you know, you're not feeling so great. The key is to integrate it into all of the doing that you have, and you don't have to take a long break like I did at all. So always on isn't working. And I mentioned this already because we know this, right? There's literally stats from the World Health Organization that 1 out of 3 corporate employees are burning out. In healthcare, it's 1 out of 2. This is from June 2022. This is after the pandemic. But just know that we're always struggling with fatigue and mental health. So if we're not taking care of ourselves, it's no one else's job to do that. And so this is the idea of behind emotional intelligence, and that pausing can be part of the solution. And even little things, like we all have heard about the story, you take a shower, you get your best ideas there. It's because our brains aren't on. And so when we create these intentional shifts for ourselves, we get insights, we get aha moments, we get relaxation, we get oxytocin. I work a lot in neuroscience, and oxytocin is the neurochemical wash, which helps bring cortisol down. Cortisol is the stress hormone, right? So this is just a stat here I like to share. 40% of our creative ideas come from breaks. How about that? So, we really just need to embrace this, I think, as a concept and a new paradigm, because the old way is broken, and that's okay. Things need to break and then get healed and fixed. And that's how things go in good cycles. So just know that thinking about yourself, what could I do differently? And we'll talk about that in the pause plan. A little bit about burnout, though. It's been around since 1974 when it was coined as a term and was recognized as a disease. And now burnout is still in that sense, it's uniquely affecting things in professional roles, but it can be personal, it can be professional, it doesn't really discriminate. But the question is, what will it be in the future? And these are the definitions. This is, if you saw my TEDx talk or you end up going there on my website, I talk about the definition here, and I won't go into all the details, but it's essentially chronic stress. That's it. And it's elevated chronic stress where you've had it for a long time. That's the whole point of being chronic. But there's three attributes that happen. You feel depleted or exhausted. You have increased mental distance, like you're literally just distancing yourself. It could be from individuals in your life or feelings of negativism. And you just don't feel as productive. You're reduced in that way. I want to talk about the stages of burnout. This is something that came up in the Q&A already, so I'm heading this on straight, where stress versus burnout are different. I think of it like a spectrum. Okay, so this is from Blank Slate, and you can see there's actually 5 levels of stress, where you've got the stress level going from green to red, which is the far right, and then performance. So it's a bell curve. So stress is green, like there is healthy stress. Eustress is actually a phenomenon that improves our productivity. Do you ever notice when you have a deadline, how productive you are? Like that's eustress, that's the green, right? That's actually the high green, right? You're focused, you're motivated. When you don't have any deadlines, you don't have any stress, you're actually bored. It's apathy. That's worse. Like you're not in that at all. But then when it becomes too much, maybe this is self-imposed or maybe it's external, then we get into the unhealthy balance. That's more on the farther right side, where we're tired, we're exhausted, we have overload. And then the real final stage of that is just burnout with that chronic stress. And so just know that these exist, and here are those 5 phases again, and just give yourself a little check. Where would you put yourself right now in the world? Where would you put yourself? Maybe you're at this beautiful yellow height of optimum performance. The reality is we're probably not all there. I know I'm not usually there. So, are you more on this far left side or the far right side? Because the cool part is you get to change it. You get to move it down or up depending on what you need. All right, so we're going to cover these 3 keys today in relation to how to thrive, and they do relate to burnout. And I think of burnout like that spectrum, right? It's stress, it's overwhelm, and it's the extreme, which potentially can be burnout. But the reason why I said you have these tools is they're all learnable. And once we have these tools to kind of decide how to show up, it can change everything. All right, so who's excited to change some stuff? I don't know. I know I am. Let's talk about the first one, navigating the negativity. So, has anyone noticed that your brain kind of feels judgmental sometimes? I don't know. I know I do. And I also think of the critic, right? There's also this gecko on the slide. I live in Florida half the year in Sarasota, and these guys are all over the place. But they remind me I have a reptilian brain as well, which is literally primal. It's been around since the beginning of man, thousands of years, and it's primed to flight or fight. And that's how we survived thousands of years. That's how you and I are sitting here today. So we have to know that this is the part of our brain that's working when we're feeling judgmental or negative. The critic mind is kind of like a default mode because it's how we survived. So first, just know that that's what's going on. And it doesn't mean anything other than I'm feeling negative right now, right? Notice there's no judgment in that statement. It doesn't mean, why am I such a loser? These are distortions that can also show up there, cognitive distortions. Loss aversion is also a phenomenon that happens with negativity. Anyone heard of loss aversion? This is Nobel Prize winning research from Daniel Kahneman and Avery Tversky. They basically wrote a whole book and did a whole world of economic research, which basically says people prefer avoiding losses than acquiring gains, right? So think of it like it's better to lose $5 than to find $5. It's harder, it's riskier, more risk averse people show up. So the principle is super prominent, and it's the same in our life. It's the same in the news, politics, right? Loss aversion, it's all over the place. So that's part of it too. And then we've got essentially these distortions I mentioned, things that are non-objective, that we are very subjective creatures. That's the reptilian brain, right? So shoulda, coulda, wouldas, those are the things that was stressing me out when I was burning out. Always or never, like it's black or white, catastrophizing, self-judgment, self-critics, negativity bias, right? We're like, these are all unconscious. We're not thinking these things, but they're going on all the time. Our brain is 93% unconscious, by the way, Bruce Lipton says. So just know that, dude, we're in negativity land all the time. So it's really hard to take a step out of it. And that's why this work is tough. That's why if we're not aware, we don't bring it back to self-awareness, then it's really hard to do anything different, because how would you? You're just stuck here and you don't know where you are. You're like, oh, I'm just the way it is. But no, you're actually on this autopilot mode, but you get to change it, because you get to say, wait a second, hang on, what's happening here, right? And that leads us to the second key, which is to get really curious about what's happening. But even more so, it's an act of courage to get curious, because you're challenging everything. You're challenging your status quo, you're challenging your comfort zone, you're challenging how you're going to show up in the moment by moment, which makes your life. Yeah. So how do we get courageously curious? That's a tongue twister. Well, as you can see from these cute cows on the screen, we can do a couple things. Ellen Langer, who is a professor out of Harvard, she wrote many books on her research. Mindfulness is one of the biggest ones. She claims that mindfulness is noticing the novelty. So when we notice new things, we're all of a sudden taking ourselves out of primal brain and into the pretext, the things. All of a sudden, our brains are operating in a very different way, and we're no longer occupied with a lot of those thoughts. And this is a skill. Like I said, you might have decades being the same way that you've been, but if you start doing this, maybe you have a mindfulness practice already. This is a wonderful thing to do. You could just look out your window right now and start to notice, what did I not notice today? All of a sudden, you're going to get a list. And all of a sudden, you're like, wow, that's interesting. I had no idea those were even there. I've lived across the street from these people for 30 years. Yeah, so there's a lot in that you can review. And also, number two, everything is data. Everything. Meaning, I'm collecting data when I have a pause, and I'll go over some powerful ways to have a very short pause that you can start to implement now, including emotional feedback. But it's all data. It's not good or bad. It's not right or wrong. That's when we get into more of that looped thinking and the negativity bias, because we're creatures of judgment. We just love judging. We're like judging machines, right? But if we are allowing ourselves to just say, hang on, like actually everything is data. Wow. Like I just noticed I'm never even noticing things out my window anymore. I'm just completely focused. I don't even get up for 2 hours sometimes. Wow, it's so interesting. That's what I'm talking about. And the third thing is to just ask yourself some questions, right? Getting curious, again, no judgment. What am I willing to change? What is this a study of potentially? There's other ways you can try this, like journaling. That's a great pause. Remember, it's an intentional shift in behavior. It might be 2 minutes in the morning or in the evening before you go to bed. You can ask yourself how you're feeling, right? What do I really desire? So these are all really helpful. So here's a pause interjected right now. What's one way you can navigate negativity differently? And just think about this. If you want to share it in the Q&A, feel free. Again, like it's great to be here and listening to these things, but if you're not actually implementing them, nothing will change, right? This will be gone and you'll forget about me and go on to your day. But if you actually take action, that's the intention you bring, that is where the changes happen. That's how you shift things. And I think that's so cool because we have control over that, right? You get to choose. I can't read the Q&A, I don't think. So if there's anything in there that Holly, you want to check out, please let us know. And courage, there's this quote from Paul Tillich, who was a philosopher. Decision is a risk rooted in the courage of being free. That's what he says. And I think that just speaks to what we're talking about so much, because it takes courage to say, I want to do things different. And that's huge. It's really easy to do the same thing for the rest of your life, right? I covered some burnout stats, so I won't really go into that. The other thing here, now that we covered the second key, is how can I get courageously curious about myself that will serve me to be less stressed or less in my head, right? You could ask these questions like, how am I feeling? What is this a study of? What do I desire? Notice the novelty. These are great, really, action items that you could just start today if you wanted to. It could be part of your pause plan. Okay, so let's move on to the third key. Get a glass of my tea here. All right, the third key is to be your own disruptor. You can disrupt the patterns, the habits, the things that are normal to you. I'm going to sneeze. I'm going to mute myself if I do. But this means creating boundaries and rules that you know that you need and want. So hot tips are really to figure out what those are, right? What do you need to feel more aligned? So maybe you notice, why is everyone on their devices at 6 o'clock when we're sitting down to dinner? Why is my friend never looking at me and doing things on her phone when I'm talking to her? Or why am I having to explain what I'm doing and my boss isn't reading the reports that I'm sharing? I don't know, whatever it might be, right? So you can have a conversation or share, and it might mean a risk. It might mean something that you haven't done already. And also make a list of your non-negotiables, right? What are maybe one or two or three things, not more than three things that would be your non-negotiables for what you need every day to feel okay, feel good. So maybe it's that cup of coffee. Awesome. I know I love my coffee and I'm drinking tea now and I'm like, oh, but that's okay. I'm working on it. Tea is good for me. Might be getting 8 hours of sleep, 7 hours of sleep. Most of us are lucky if we get 8 hours of sleep. So maybe it's 7, maybe it's going to bed at 9 o'clock, 10 o'clock. You have to come up with this. That's the idea. Like what I think of won't work for you. It's about what works and what you want to be thinking about. So there's a lot of ways to do this and pause, right, to disrupt things. And I want to talk about a few of my favorites. And so again, an intentional shift in behavior means it doesn't take a lot of time. This is maybe a moment and doesn't take money. It doesn't take, all it takes is intention and a little bit of effort if you usually need that. So one of the most powerful pauses I've learned in my training is how to name a feeling. So this is from the Wright Graduate University, the Wright Foundation, where we work with 5 primary feelings. And if any of you have seen the movie, maybe you've seen Inside Out, you kind of know 4 of these already: fear, hurt, sadness, anger, joy. There's no order. And the one that's different in Inside Out, a lot of theorists talk about disgust. That's okay. Disgust is an emotion. Hurt, we also think of as a primary feeling. So that's what I work with. But just ask yourself right now, in this moment with me, feelings happen in the moment. Which of these 5 are you closest to, or that are you feeling? If you want to share that in the Q&A, please do. For me right now, and I've been doing this a long time, so I'm aware, like my body's trained to talk to my brain in this way, the mind-body connection. And that's what we're doing. Every time we name a feeling, we're dropping into our body to be present, because you have to know what's going on to know what you're feeling. It's a wonderful presence tool. So I'm feeling joy. I'm feeling sad and fear. And that's it. And now notice I don't have to explain myself. I don't have to like go into a story. I'm just naming things. And there's a spectrum for each of these. It doesn't mean it's like jumping for joy. And I bet you that one person at least here has already thought of, well, why are 4 out of the 5 of these like bad? Anyone think of that? Or why are 4 out of the 5 of these negative? Okay, so I want to just talk about that briefly, because did you notice that, was that objective or subjective? It's a little subjective, right? So we're always having subjective thoughts. These are the judgments. And this is the everything is data part. So know that your feelings are data. Your emotions are data. It's a field, right? They come and go. They're like waves. They come across you thousands of times a day. You might catch one, you might miss one. Maybe you miss them all. It's all good. But know that it's data and it's not anything other than that. We were taught, usually in our families, when we were little, usually before the age of 7, how to think about these emotions. And our families and our parents had their emotional connection to these too. So just know that there's going to be judgments around them. And you can also redesign that thinking a little bit to say, you know what? Oh yeah, everything is data. I'm just feeling some fear. Boom. And you've done the pause. So this is a very powerful way to just try a pause out today. And congrats, you already did one if you did that exercise with me. All right, belly breath pause. Let's do this one together because I'm always a fan. If you put both feet on the ground, you take a hand, you could put it on your belly and close your eyes if that feels good, or just lower them to a soft gaze and inhale through your nose if you can. Hold that breath at the top if you can, and then exhale slowly through your mouth like you're blowing through a straw. All right. Open your eyes if they were closed. Take your hand away. I'm wondering, Who here feels different? A little different, maybe? Yeah. So that one took what? Maybe 5 seconds. But how often are we doing that, right? We can know it all to the cows come home, but if we're not implementing it, then nothing changes. We're going to be a stress ball. And I say that with total love, by the way. Digital device pauses. So I call these DDPs. I talk about them in the book. All these pauses are in the book. Where we're really hooked, aren't we? Like, come on, we are. The stat 10 years ago was we check our phones 250 times a day. I don't want to know what the stat is right now, but we have to create some rules around this. Otherwise, they're going to disrupt in a way that isn't working for us. So what kind of pause could you use with your digital devices? I know people take like weeks off of social media, but what if it was just every Sunday from 2 to 6 p.m.? Or you did something that was in a way working for you, which is no digital devices at the table when we're eating, on your bedside when you sleep. I don't know, whatever they are. There's all ways that you can all do that. A gratitude pause is awesome. Anyone here have a gratitude practice that you do daily or close to it? This is a really, really big one. And there's a lot of research behind this because one, it's so easy because we're naturally wired to appreciate if we choose to, right? Remember, we're wired for negativity, but what if we changed that up and said, I'm so grateful for the sun today. Wow, it's light outside. My car started. Woo, I'm on a roll. So when we do that and we can build our list up, maybe there's 5 things a day, 10 things a day. You can even be grateful for the good, the bad, and the ugly. Like, what's one thing that didn't go well? But I'm grateful because it helped me learn something. Those things can really serve us. And the benefits are proven. Here's a list of scientifically proven benefits. I'm not going to go through them all. There's also an infographic here where you can see in the square box towards the bottom that when you practice gratitude in the workplace, productivity goes up 50%. That's a 50, folks. Whoa. So you're telling me if I hold the door open for someone, I'm going to be more productive? Yep. You are, pretty much. And that's compounded, right? If everyone is practicing that, right? Saying thank you, telling someone they ran the meeting well, giving someone, whatever it is, it doesn't matter. But those are all really, really powerful ways, along with improving self-esteem. And you're training your brain to think positive. That's, I think, the biggest thing. You can take a mindful moment pause. So what I mean by this is kind of what we've been doing a little bit already, but just take whatever you're already doing and make it mindful. So you're not making any extra effort other than thinking consciously about it, which might be things like what's on this slide. Brushing your teeth, feeling the bubbles, feeling the texture. What is it tasting like? Eating 3 mindful bites before every meal. Walking, feeling your feet on the floor, grounding like into the earth. They're so easy, but we just have to remember them. That's the hardest part. So maybe there's one thing here that you do. Waiting in line is a great one. I'm a big fan of that. Okay, so we've talked a lot about how to disrupt all these things. What's one way that you can support yourself to be a disruptor? Let's just name that. So if you want to put that into the Q&A or put something else in there, feel free. Well, we're getting towards the end here, but before we do that, I have a survey and I have a free gift for you, which is this 3 keys to turn burnout into thriving at work. It's a PDF guidebook. So if you want to scan the QR code, and I'll put this in the chat, it's going to be in the, I guess, I don't know if it's going to work with the Q&A, but you're going to be taken to a page. And it's a survey about this talk. So I love getting feedback. I'm always looking for improvement. Speaking of, staying objective, it's important for me to get that. And if you fill out like 5 little questions, it'll take you 2 minutes right now. It'll give you the link to get to this free gift that you can download. I'd love to support you more. It talks of different things as in that guidebook. It talks about the 5 feelings in even more detail. The primary emotions, why emotional intelligence is so important, and what you can do so you can thrive. Because that's why work and spend half your life doing something when you're feeling so depleted? Just doesn't add up, right? So I'll just give you a moment here and then we'll move into the last part. which is the pause plan. I didn't sneeze. I'm very proud of myself. I swear I was going to sneeze and I was like, oh, you know that feeling? And then it didn't happen. So I was very happy. And if anyone wants a copy of these slides, I should add, I'm happy to send them to you as a PDF. Just let me know in LinkedIn and you can connect with me there and I'll forward along. No problem. I'm going to move on. If you keep doing that, no problem. But let's just talk about the pause plan. This is really simple. It's kind of what we've been doing the pause plan as we've been talking. You're just going to pick one thing you want to implement, which is out of these 3 keys, right? And be specific. So the more specific, I think the better, right? So if you say, I want to be more curious, awesome start. What do you want to be more curious about? Like, what do you want to do? Do you want to ask yourself how you're feeling once a day? That's a really good one, I'd say. Maybe it's to notice what's outside your window at 3 p.m. You're going to take a little break and put yourself in a timer for 5 minutes. You put that in your calendar. So notice there's intention, like with everything there. So what is the thing that you want to do? And then implement it by bedtime tonight. So let's say you want to say, on Saturday nights, and this is a friend of mine, she does a tech Shabbat. So by Saturday sundown or Friday sundown to Saturday sundown, there's no technology in her family. This is Tiffany Shalane, and she's in the book. She's one of the stories that I talk about, and her book is called 24/7. Wonderful woman. And so she, like, if they have to go somewhere, they have to print out the GPS directions from the printer and like Google Maps. Like they take this super seriously. That is an incredible intention, and what a great way to pause, right? You're like, oh, remember that way to like use maps and stuff? That's how I got around Albany most of the time, was getting lost. So that's the idea for the pause plan, okay? And then one final note here, we've got one extra thing if you really want to take this to the next level. And I know Holly did get some books, so she's going to give those out to the folks who've already submitted questions. Yay, congrats, we're going to get to those in a second. But I also offer this basically a 30-minute Amplify Your Impact breakthrough call. The breakthrough call is a 30-minute call with me. We're on Zoom like this, but you get 3 things out of it where we talk about what your biggest challenge might be that you're thinking about right now, and you'll get a tool to implement. And then we'll also figure out how to move forward in a recommendation. So there's no strings attached. It's just a way I want to be of service and support you so that you can thrive. And sometimes that's all it takes is 30 minutes. So let's talk. I will put this in the chat as well so that you can say that. It's a bit.ly call, but it is a Calendly page. That should work. I'm gonna have to cut and paste that into a browser. All right. All right, so we've made it to the end. Congratulations. Thank you all for being incredible listeners and participants today. We'll move into the questions here and also take any new questions in the Q&A chat if you like.
Rachel, thank you so much. This was invaluable information. I know many of us know this at a conscious level, but we don't actually implement it in our daily lives. So thank you for pushing us to start doing that. One key takeaway for me was your gratitude pause. That's one of my favorites. I know when I've been either at my stressed or, feeling some form of depression, that's the one that usually helps me get out of it the quickest, is just, being grateful that I'm alive today. Sometimes that's where you need to start. And one of the ways
I'm
that
here. I made it.
and I made it. I woke up today. I feel pretty good. Sun's shining. That's really wonderful. And as a leader, when I had a team, that's one of the things that helped me kind of check in with people. So I would start our meetings with roses and thorns and, tell us one thing that you're grateful about.
Yes, I love the roses and thorns. That's a really good one. Thank you for picking that one up. What's a rose from the week? What's a rose from the week? What's a thorn from the week, right? Something like that.
Yeah. And it really helps you know
So
from your
good.
team what's distracting them, what's preventing them from being present sometimes. And so sometimes you need to follow up on that. Other times it just helps them to get other people to know, hey, I might need a little grace this week or a little patience, because there's other stuff happening in our lives that is forcing us to show up or not to be able to show up fully present. So thank you. I really appreciated those. And we do have some questions. So for those of you who completed my survey before the webinar, I did ask some questions. So I'm going to present them to Rachel and allow her to answer them here. So one of the questions was, how can leaders balance driving results while taking care of their mental and emotional health? Is there a middle ground between pushing for success and allowing yourself to recharge?
So good, guys. I thank you for the question. Like, who relates to this? How do you balance those results? So that's the forces and tension, everybody. Remember the two poles we're all holding? So we have to be careful because it's really easy to over-index on that go, 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 because we're all doers. I mean, I know I'm a high achiever like you. I want to perform. I want to do great. So we just have to check in. And that's why these pauses are so important. So my thought is, checking in as a leader with the folks on your team is super important. Like what Holly was just saying, what's a rose, what's a thorn? How are you feeling today? We used to do in the venture studio I just resigned from, we used to do like what's working, what's not working, what frustrates you. So to me, these are like telltale conversations that help someone feel heard and seen, so they get cared. You feel like you're getting your yearnings met to feel seen and heard, which is huge. You want to feel valued at work, right? The leader's just like an example I have is one of my clients who just left his job because his boss was just like transactional. Do this, do that. Okay, now that this is done, do that. And where's the satisfaction in that? So it's up to the leaders. It's all of us are 100% responsible and up to 50% of the blame, which means the leaders and the people on the team need to be responsible for what works for you. So if emotional health is at stake, you have to share that in a way that works for you, right? I'm feeling really pushed this week. I know I'm also working with my in-laws at home and they're stressing me out. And I know I just am not at my best right now. I mean, that's vulnerable. So I guess my answer to this is the middle ground is knowing someone, creating trust between the two of you or a team is really the gateway towards how to strive and create a balance that works great. And that's how high-performing teams work, by the way. The research is there where they talk about their problems, they talk about what's not working, they talk about what is working, and they create solutions together. So I think that, hopefully that gives you some ideas.
Excellent. And you mentioned that the healthcare industry has the highest burnout rate, and that includes, I'm assuming, the mental health field. So as someone working in the mental health field, what are some ways to stop feeling guilty for taking time to yourself?
2%. Yeah, exactly.
And not feel like you're letting your clients down. Their time is spent thinking about other people and they don't feel like they have a break.
So big. So first, I just want to acknowledge anyone in the healthcare field because you're doing a lot. And giving yourself some of that acknowledgement is key because we're so used to serving. And I have a lot of friends who are in that field. I worked in the venture studio in that field, and we're trained, literally it's ingrained in us in healthcare and mental healthcare to serve and support others first before ourselves, I think. And so it's a rewiring of how we have to think about ourselves because we have to take care of ourselves first. It's that old oxygen mask story, but we're not trained that way. We know that the medical system isn't set up that way. So how do we do it? So that's the catch-22. And hopefully, there's a couple ways that I talked about today that can help you have a break, help you take even micro pauses during your day. Believe me, they do change things. The parasympathetic nervous system kicks in when we take a breath that's conscious. All of a sudden, the fight or flight goes away. It might come back in 5 minutes, but that helps us remember we've got options. So unfortunately, I don't have like a magic formula here, but I would say if you can carve out 5 minutes to yourself of me time before that weekend starts on the Saturday or the Sunday, how am I feeling right now? Maybe you journal, like my vision for today is X. And I check in with myself. I go for connection. I talk to people and have great conversations. I get a hug. I get a high five, like envision things, because that's how they start to happen. Your brain has a visual of it, which starts to bring it into your world. It's just like any goal you have. Hopefully that's helpful.
One of the other things that I loved that you shared, which was a reframing for me, was that I'm in control of my stress and can actively work to change it.
Yeah.
Because I think so often we feel like it's out of our control. And so those pauses really do help us to
Yeah.
reclaim our ability to change our stress.
Exactly. And I just want to also honor that, we're all doing the best we can, right? Obviously, right? If we've got 24-hour shifts that we need to do in a hospital, like you're going to be stressed. So it goes back to those polls, right? It's like, okay, I know this is the ringer. I'm in a crazy situation right now, but it's not like the light at the tunnel is X. And when I do that, like I'm going to celebrate in a way that really serves me, which might be something that really nourishes you. We didn't talk about nourishment today. It's a whole nother topic. But that's how we kind of combat burnout as well, things that can grow and are how present.
So Rachel, there's two other questions that I'd like to pose if we have time. How does burnout affect men versus women? Do you have anything that you can add on that? There was a question about if the burnout affects women versus men differently.
Oh, yeah, yeah. And I was saying yes, because women tend to take more on. So there's an inherent responsibility that like, oh, I got to take care of the kids, I got to take care of the family, my husband, potentially work, the house, etc. So there's just a tendency, I think, in our society, in the Western culture, there's more of that responsibility that women tend to take on. Remember, it's not like, we all have a choice. That goes back to my existentialist views here, but we also do have more on that because there's not just one thing, but that's a generalization. It's not for everybody, right? There's definitely different scenarios there, but in general, women in society are taught, how much do you, like how much do you hear be a good girl? As a woman myself, I heard that a lot. So I didn't want to speak up. I didn't want to share if things weren't going well. I wanted to be a pleaser. And I think a lot of women identify with that, and men do too. But I think in general, yes. But here's the deal. We all have the way we can respond to it. We all can choose how to respond to it. So the next time you feel burned out, ask yourself, how am I taking care of me right now as a woman or a man or anyone, right? To me, the responsibility is not gender specific. It's how we respond to it. And that requires change, especially if our family system is wired in like, well, you got to do it all, whatever your sex is. Does that make sense?
Yes, that makes perfect sense. And then our final question is, what is a good strategy to use when you are feeling the burnout, but those around you are pressuring you to continue your workload at the same pace, if not more, discouraging you from from taking that time to yourself? Do you have
Yeah.
any good conversation starters?
Yeah. It's really, really a good question. And the first thing I would say is, remember, get curious.
Mhm.
Open-ended questions are great. If you get defensive and you're like, this sucks, like, I don't want to do this, or reactive, well, how do you expect me to be? This is how it's been. And I don't know, whatever it is, that always puts someone on their heels if you're sharing that, right? So they're already going to be like, whoa. So don't take that approach. Be open and curious and be like, so I'm wondering, I noticed there's a lot of demand right now and I'm the only one doing this. Do you have any idea if there's any more resources coming? Because this isn't a long-term sustainable plan. It just isn't. I have a client I'm working with right now at a top data company going through this. They're like exponential growth. They're amazing. They're going to go IPO. And he's like, there's no resources here. He's working all around the clock. But we're working on how he can get nourished, how he can create his boundaries and have those conversations. And now he's going to work for someone else in the org. He's super excited and he knows that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. So I would say, be aware of what's outside of you and what's inside of you, because outside of you is external and we're focused externally, but we need to learn how to focus internally first. And that's the skill. And it's all learnable. It's all doable. But the problem is we're not taught that. And we need help. Like no one can do it on their own because that's not how we're wired. And usually, we're creatures of our own consciousness. and habits. And so we just end up doing the same things and never progressing in a way that serves us. So we have to get help, and there's lots of different ways to do that. Coaching is one of them. Therapy is one of them. There's books and courses.
Yeah, that's a really great point, is because sometimes we just focused on, we're so overwhelmed that we don't think, what is overwhelming me?
Yeah,
And
and then
that,
and then the best thing to do is name the feeling in that sense. So
yep,
just go to that skill we talked about. Like, what feeling do I have right now? Use only those 5 so you don't get back in your head. It's
yep,
really easy to like hem and haw around 300 different feelings. Oh, I feel a little this, maybe it's that. That just gets us in our head. So stick to those 5. All of a sudden you drop in, you're like, wow, I'm just feeling fear. Okay, now I get curious. Like, well, that's interesting. Like, what is happening? Oh, I just don't want to get fired. Okay, well, how can I move into a space that doesn't feel so scarce, and I can move into a space that feels more trust? So there's way more to build on that, but that's a good place to start, is just to name a feeling.
excellent. Well, this has really helped me. And I've already heard feedback in the
Yay!
background from other people that are feeling the same. So I'm
That's awesome.
delighted that we had so many people join us today. I will be sending out the recording of this to those who have registered. We will also post it on the Alumni Association's website. And it seems like many people will be connecting with you on LinkedIn to receive the PowerPoint. If you don't mind, I might share it as well when I send out the recording.
Yeah.
And I look forward to shipping out the books to the people who sent us in these great questions. I thought they were really,
They were really good questions, everybody. Like, way to go. And you're so, I just admire all of you for showing up. Like I said, this is the first step, is just to be curious. You guys are here. You did it.
Mhm.
So you're on your path, like you're on the way, and focus on the pause plan. Just pick one thing. Don't do 10 things or 3 things. Law of little things says one thing, and incremental changes make the big changes over time. So have fun with it. And thank you so much.
Well, we thank you so much for your time spent with us today and for giving back to the Alumni Association. We're so proud
Got my
of,
flag. Got my
yeah,
flag.
wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Rachel. Have a wonderful day
You.
and keep in touch.
So long, everyone. Thank you so much. Bye-bye. Take care.